In 2008, the world did not just suffer a financial crisis. It suffered an exposure. The mask slipped. The guardians failed. The priests of modern finance, the banks, the regulators, the trusted institutions, suddenly looked exactly what they were. Fragile men standing in front of a broken machine. Markets collapsed. Governments panicked. The public was told the system had to be saved. But beneath that panic was a darker realization. If money depends on trust, and trust can fail, then the entire system is standing on theater. And while the world was busy trying to rescue the old machine, someone else was designing a new one. No interviews, no stage, no company, no identity anyone could verify. Just a name that may not have belonged to a single human being at all. Satoshi Nakamoto. And from behind that name came a document so small, it looked harmless. 9 pages, that was all. 9 pages that did not ask for belief. 9 pages that did not ask for permission. 9 pages that quietly described a way to move value across the internet without banks, without rulers, without a trusted third party standing in the middle. Most people think Bitcoin became dangerous when it became expensive. That is wrong. Bitcoin became dangerous the moment those 9 pages proved that trust in financial institutions was no longer the only way to coordinate monetary truth. That was the real detonation. A white paper written by a ghost. A protocol born in the ashes of institutional failure. A system that would go live, survive, spread, and then outlive its creator. Because after writing it, building it, and setting it in motion, Satoshi disappeared. No final interview, no founder mythology, no explanation to the world he had just changed. Only code, only silence, only a chain that kept moving without him. This is not the story of a cryptocurrency. This is the story of a ghost who wrote a protocol powerful enough to haunt the financial system forever. This is Satoshi Nakamoto. 9 pages that changed everything. The white paper code. Before the ghost became a myth, he had to solve the one problem that made digital money impossible. Before Bitcoin, digital money was a contradiction because the internet was built to copy. A song can be copied, a file can be copied, a photo can be copied, a message can be copied. So what happens when money becomes data? What stops someone from copying the money too? That was the trap, the double spending problem. And it was not some small technical inconvenience. It was the wall. It was the reason digital cash kept collapsing back into the same old structure. If value can be duplicated, then someone has to stand in the middle and verify what is real. A bank, a company, a central ledger, a trusted authority. Again and again, every road led back to the same empire. Trust the institution. The institution keeps the books. The institution decides what happened. The institution says which transaction counts and which one does not. And for a while, people accepted that as normal. Then came 2008, and suddenly the institutions demanding trust were the same institutions begging to be saved. That changed the emotional temperature of the world, because once the public sees the guardians fail, trust stops feeling like safety. It starts feeling like vulnerability. That was the atmosphere Satoshi wrote into. Not optimism, disillusionment, not technological innocence, institutional fatigue. And that is why the white paper matters. Because it was not just solving a coding problem, it was answering a question history had made unavoidable. What if money should not depend on trust at all? The white paper directly frames this problem. Digital signatures are not enough because online payments still rely on financial institutions to prevent double spending. And Satoshi proposes a peer-to-peer solution instead. And then came the sentence that broke the spell. Not with emotion, with precision. The title did not sound like a revolution. It sounded like an engineering memo. Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. But hidden inside that restraint was a kind of cold violence. Because the first line of the abstract said this: a purely peer-to-peer version of electronic cash would allow online payments to be sent directly from one party to another without going through a financial institution. Without going through a financial institution. That is the line. That is the fracture point. That is where the old system stopped being inevitable and became optional. Because almost the entire digital financial order rested on one assumption: someone must sit in the middle. Someone must authorize, someone must settle, someone must validate, someone must decide what is true. And Satoshi's answer was mercilessly simple. No, the network can do it. Not because the network is moral, not because people are good, not because trust magically appears, but because verification can replace trust. That was the deeper genius. Bitcoin did not promise better people. It designed around the fact that people cannot be trusted perfectly. And in doing so, it replaced the human center of digital money with rules, incentives, proof of work, and distributed consensus. That is why the paper still feels so eerie. It reads like someone who was already emotionally finished with the old system. No pleading, no rhetoric, no grandstanding, just a protocol. Bitcoin.org still presents Satoshi's original paper as foundational reading for understanding how Bitcoin works, which says everything about how complete those 9 pages were from the start. But a revolution does not happen because a sentence sounds beautiful. It happens when the design is strong enough to survive reality. Most people have heard the legend. Very few have studied the machine. And the machine is what made Satoshi dangerous. Transactions would be broadcast to the network, not quietly approved by a bank first, not submitted to an institutional gatekeeper, broadcast openly. Then those transactions would be collected into blocks, and those blocks would be time-stamped through proof of work. That was the turning point, because proof of work made history expensive to fake. To rewrite the past, an attacker would have to redo the work and outrun the honest network. That changes everything. In the old world, the ledger is secure because an authority says it is secure. In Bitcoin, the ledger is secure because attacking it is costly. That is a different civilization. Then came the longest chain rule. The valid history is the chain with the greatest accumulated proof of work. That sounds like a small technical rule. It is not. It is a method for getting strangers to agree on one history without requiring a king to declare it. And then Satoshi added the incentive layer. The first transaction in each block creates new coins and rewards the node doing the work. That is not just engineering. That is strategic design. The network does not ask to be defended. It pays to be defended. Greed is not excluded. Greed is recruited. That is why Bitcoin was never merely software. It was software fused with economics. Economics fused with game theory fused with adversarial realism. Satoshi did not build a digital coin. He built a self-reinforcing monetary organism, and he compressed the blueprint into 9 pages. That is what makes the document feel almost impossible in hindsight. So short, so cold, so complete. And yet the most important thing about the white paper was not what it explained. It was what it implied. Most people think Bitcoin was a bet on price. That is surface-level thinking. The white paper was really a bet against inherited assumptions. Before Bitcoin, the internet moved information. After Bitcoin, the internet could move scarcity. That is not a feature update. That is a civilizational mutation. Because once digital scarcity exists without a central owner, then money is no longer the only thing that changes. The logic of ownership changes. The logic of settlement changes. The logic of trust changes. The logic of financial power changes. That is why those 9 pages cast such a long shadow. They asked a fatal question. How much of the financial system is truly necessary? And how much of it survives only because no one had yet built a functioning alternative? That question is poison to legacy systems. Because once people realize the old architecture was inherited rather than inevitable, the aura begins to collapse. Banks start to look less like destiny and more like a design choice. Payment networks start to look less like laws of nature and more like toll roads built in a previous era. The white paper did not merely introduce Bitcoin. It introduced a new standard by which every financial institution would eventually be judged. Can you do what this protocol does? Can you settle without permission? Can you verify without centralized trust? Can you survive without a visible sovereign center? That is why even those who hate Bitcoin still live inside the intellectual world it created. The white paper changed the grammar of money. And once grammar changes, every sentence after it sounds different. Then the PDF crossed the line from theory into reality. And that is when the story stopped being speculative and started becoming irreversible. On January 3, 2009, Satoshi mined the Genesis block, the first block in Bitcoin's blockchain. That was the moment the white paper became real. And inside that first block, he embedded a message. The Times 03/John/2009. Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks. That line is not decoration. It is one of the coldest opening moves in financial history. Because it did three things at once. It time-stamped the birth of the chain. It anchored Bitcoin in the context of crisis. And it framed the protocol as an answer to a world where bank failure had become public spectacle. Bitcoin was not born in peace, it was born in distrust. And that is why the Genesis block still feels like a coded message from the edge of a collapsing order. Even the first 50 BTC from that block became part of the legend. Investopedia notes they cannot be spent, a detail that only made the origin feel more mythic, more sealed, more sacred. But the real miracle was not symbolic, it was operational. The chain kept moving, block after block, node after node. A protocol that did not need a ministry, a ledger that did not ask for nationality, a system that could survive because it was anchored in rules rather than rulers. That is the point where most people still underestimate Satoshi. He did not just write an extraordinary paper. He shipped a living system. And once the system was alive, it no longer needed everyone to understand it immediately. It only needed to keep working. And then, when the machine was finally breathing on its own, the ghost stepped away from it. This is the part that transformed Satoshi from a founder into an apparition. He did not simply vanish in one dramatic instant. He withdrew like someone dismantling his own shadow. Britannica describes Satoshi Nakamoto as the presumed pseudonym behind Bitcoin's first software and its 2008 white paper, while emphasizing that no one knows whether he was one person or a group. Bitcoin magazine records that Satoshi's last software release associated with him was version 0.3.19 in December 2010, and that he then removed his own name from Bitcoin's copyright statements while adding other developers to Bitcoin.org's contact page. That is not ego, that is controlled erasure. It is the behavior of someone who understood the danger of remaining too visible. Then came the final messages. Britannica notes that in April 2011, Satoshi said he had moved on to other things and later wrote, "I wish you wouldn't keep talking about me as a mysterious, shadowy figure." Bitcoin magazine similarly reports that on April 26, 2011, Satoshi asked Gavin Anderson to downplay that image and transferred the cryptographic key to Bitcoin's alert system. That line always hits like a coded farewell, because by then the mysterious, shadowy figure image was already becoming part of the mythology. And Satoshi seemed to understand something almost no modern founder understands. If Bitcoin had a permanent face, then Bitcoin would never truly be free of hierarchy. A founder becomes a center becomes a pressure point becomes leverage, media leverage, political leverage, legal leverage, psychological leverage. So he left, and by leaving, he may have completed the design. A decentralized protocol should not have a visible king standing above it. So the king disappeared into the fog. That was not a bug in the story. That was the final expression of it. And then came the silence that made the myth impossible to contain. Because the ghost did not just leave. He left the fortune untouched. As Bitcoin grew, so did the weight of the mystery. Because according to analysis cited by Britannica, one early miner widely believed to be Satoshi may have accumulated more than 1 million Bitcoins, and none of that Bitcoin had ever been removed from the wallet. Investopedia also summarizes that some researchers estimate Satoshi may hold around 1 million BTC, though certainty remains impossible because the identity behind the name is still unknown. That silence is almost impossible to imitate. A founder creates one of the most consequential assets in modern history and does not cash out. No yacht photos, no victory lap, no "I told you so." No billionaire operating mythology, just non-participation. And that changes the moral structure of the legend. Because had Satoshi sold aggressively, critics would say Bitcoin was always a founder extraction scheme. Had he remained in public, the network would never stop orbiting him. Had he returned to direct its meaning, Bitcoin would never feel fully decentralized. But he did not. He let the protocol stand alone. And in doing so, he converted himself from a man into a force, not a personality, a principle. The creator of the system did not remain above the system, he dissolved into it. That is why Satoshi still feels less like a founder and more like a ghost protocol embedded in the culture of Bitcoin itself. A presence defined by absence, a fortune defined by stillness, a creator whose silence became one of the strongest arguments for the system he left behind. And that is why the white paper still matters now. Not as history, as an active wound in the old financial order. Today, people reduce Bitcoin to price. That is what happens when markets touch something before they understand it. They turn it into a ticker. But the deeper story is still inside the white paper, because the white paper introduced a possibility that the old system could not fully absorb, that monetary settlement can emerge from open verification instead of institutional trust. That is not merely a technical alternative. It is a philosophical threat. It means scarcity can be native to the internet. Truth can be distributed. Settlement can exist without a visible sovereign center. And ownership can survive without a trusted intermediary standing between you and the ledger. That idea did not stop at Bitcoin. It altered how people think about money, power, coordination, and digital reality itself. Even Bitcoin's enemies are forced to react to categories the white paper created. That is how historical documents reveal their power, not when everyone agrees with them, when everyone must answer them. And all of this came from 9 pages. Not a ministry, not a treaty, not a corporation, not a military decree, a PDF. That is the white paper code, a small document that carried enough structural truth to reorganize the behavior of strangers across the planet. And once such a code exists, history does not go back to sleep. The old world thought power had a face, a building, a seal, a chairman, a government desk, a bank logo. Then a ghost arrived and proved that power could also look like this: a pseudonym, a white paper, a chain of blocks, and a system that keeps moving long after its creator has vanished. That is why Satoshi Nakamoto still matters. Not because he became visible, because he became unnecessary. He wrote the code, lit the fuse, walked into the dark, and left the machine behind. A machine born from distrust, secured by proof, fed by incentives, protected by decentralization, and haunted forever by the fact that its architect never came back to claim the throne. That is the fate at the center of Bitcoin. The founder disappeared, the protocol survived, the fortune remained still, and the world was forced to adapt to a system that did not need permission to exist. 9 pages. That was all it took. 9 pages to challenge banks without becoming a bank. 9 pages to challenge states without becoming a state. 9 pages to turn money into code, trust into verification, and one anonymous figure into one of the most consequential ghosts in modern history. Satoshi did not leave us a speech. He left us an operating system for monetary rebellion. And that is why, long after the man disappeared, the white paper still feels alive. This was the white paper code.